plastic. If it's a heavy die, do it one at a time. You can set your bearing right there. Now, if your die comes all the way out to the edges, make sure that you don't put blades on there. You can special cut blocks, whatever the case may be. We have plenty of room on this, so we don't have to worry about it. Take this one off and set it under this bearing. The reason I do that is because I need to work with the journals. First thing I want to inspect is make sure my journal's not rusted up, condensation builds up, things of that nature. Make sure there's no dents, dings, something of that nature. Second thing I'm looking for is my gear. I want to make sure first it's tight, and then I want to make sure that it's on the flats. And what I mean by on the flats is that my set screws right here, here's my set screw, is going right on top of that flat right there, okay? And we have 2 set screws, all right? Make sure it's on the flat. Once I've done that, I'm pretty well confident that my die's in good shape. My gear looks good, my bearers looks good. Now I'm ready to prepare it. One of the things you really have to notice is that we don't have anything other than what we need up here. And I recommend, I can't stress enough, do yourself a favor, prepare your area no matter what you're doing. You'll save yourself a lot of time and a lot of trouble. First thing I want to do with this die is I want to oil these journals. Now, I oil it stream. Some people oil it after they put the washers on because the washers push the oil right up. I usually oil it both times. They'll tell you at the school I probably oil more stuff than I've ever touched. Put on this particular setup in our shop, in the school, we use rotometric tooling. It's consistent. Every time I know the die comes in that I need 4 of these plastic washers, and that's going to center my die up. Now, I highly recommend that you get your die in, get it centered up, and leave the washers on there. Some of you have that convenience, some of you don't. But know your press. Know what it's going to take. Know what type of die you're using and how many washers go on this inside gear. Because the most important thing about this is that this gear and this bearer line up properly. Once I've done that, now I can put my square block on. My square block is used for my drive side. On this press, that would be the inside of the frame. My twist block is simply used to put in after my die's in. It makes it a lot easier. I don't have to have it perfectly straight. Put in, twist it on, size it up, pull it out, so I don't have to take my die in and out of the press. Remember, that's where most of the damage is caused, coming in and out of the press. So if you have a situation where you don't have to take the die in and out to size it up, you're in much better shape. Remember, when you put your die blocks on, your oil holes are facing up every time. You need to oil this die. I recommend a minimum every 10,000 feet. Often I'll push them to 5,000 feet, especially if we're cutting film or something, because once you start cutting something of that nature, heat builds up a little bit more, and it's heat that really wears the dies out. Make sure they oil them frequently. Put your blocks on in advance. Make sure they're smooth. Make sure there's no problems with them. Another good thing you can do is make sure that there's no burrs in here. I've seen that before and scratch up journals on dies. Once I've set it in this position, I will then probably start with about 4 washers on this end. I know I'm going to have to eat up a little bit of slack, most likely, but it gives me a good starting point. I'll oil both of my journals once I put the die in the press again, simply by using the oil hose on top of the blocks. When you're handling your die, make sure you're in this type of environment. Make sure that you understand that the most critical thing you can do to this die is damage it when you're putting it in and out of this press. So everything of that nature you need to keep on mind as you're doing it. The last thing you really need to realize here is I got this die here. Before I put this die in the press, I've got to take this bubble wrap off, okay? So I wouldn't put the die in there with this bubble wrap on. Here again, when you take the bubble wrap off, be very, very careful with your hands. You don't want to cut your hands. I can put pressure here and I can squeeze this and it's not going to cut me. But if I take my hand and I slide it, or when I'm loading this die in and I put it in and I jerk my hand out, I am going to get cut, okay? So make sure that you're handling this gently, and make sure that when you're actually around the press, you can cover the blades as much as possible. When I go to put this in the press, my hand's always under the die so that I can't nick anything. That's very critical when you start setting in your dies. All right, as you can see, I'm preparing to put this die in the press. This is a pretty light die, so I can handle it no problem. But notice my hands, my positioning when I start to go into the press. I don't have but one block on, so you can see as I go in, it makes it very, very simple. Here again, when I start to go over, key things you want to watch for are the edges and these screws. I get up over it, I square myself up, and I do this on every die, every time as a routine. I set my block in, and then I hold this, and I let it go all the way down. Don't let it drop. Now I want to make sure it's square over there. I want to make sure my gears line up, which you can see they're perfect right there. Now I'm comfortable with that. So now what I'm ready to do is put my die block on this end. Simply, I want to make sure that my hole's going to aim up. Put it here, slide it over, twist it, and now I need to check for my slack. If the die moves back and forth, I need to add washers. You see that? Now when it's doing that, I've got to add washers. It has to be tight. So as I'm looking here, I can see I probably need one more plastic washer. So I simply can pull this off and add a washer. Remember, my inside's already lined up, so I want to add washers to this side right here. So now I'm prepared to put one more washer on. Let's see what that does. Here again, oil hole up, twist it. Now then, it's barely moving. So now I'm looking probably like a fiber washer, which will be a little bit thinner. As I add this, and here again, I can do all this in a matter of seconds and never pull the die in and out. All right, one more fiber washer, which it takes about 3 fiber washers to equal 1 plastic washer. So this is going to work perfect. Right there, and as you can see, there's no slack, so whatever. Now remember, if you leave your washers on there, you eliminate that downtime. But the key thing is, if you leave your washers on there, don't assume that they're right, because they do fall off and they do come off, and your die will be loose. Always check it. But as you're checking it, remember, if I slide my hand like that, I'm in trouble. Now that I have my die locked in, my oil holes facing up, the next thing I need to pay attention to is properly oiling my die and then looking at my die wipers. It's critical that we keep this die as cool as possible. So I'm going to squirt just a little oil right here and a little oil right here before I even get started. All right, now then that our die is in place and everything's locked down and good and tight, the next thing we want to make sure of is that our wipers are all in place. And the wipers are designed to keep the journals running cool. As you can see, these wipers down here are fixed in position. They should pretty much always stay there. What they're designed to do is cool down the support roll and the die anvil on both sides. Now, you need to keep them oiled up. You need to probably soak them over the weekend, take them out, drain them, and that usually takes care of everything. And then the next wipers you need to pay attention to are the ones that actually touch the die. Now the wipers should touch the die anvil and the die bearers the same amount. They can be adjusted by the holes in the side of this press. I'm sure your press has a way of doing it. If you're unfamiliar with it and you don't know about your press, get in touch with somebody, find out. You've got to run wipers. You see our wipers are adjusted to touch each side. Now I would want to oil them every now and then. They're designed to keep the die cool as well as keep trash off the die. So it's important that you run them, you clean them, you check on them as frequent as anything else. Our next step at this point is to put our truck assembly on top of our die. We use a Rotometrics truck assembly. It does not matter which way we put this one in. It's self-centering. On the one you use, the key thing is make sure that your bearers do not land on the die or on the gear. If it does, it's going to do damage. Also, a real unique thing about this truck assembly is they have built-in wipers inside your dual bearing. The way these bearings are set up, this will actually run cooler to your die and give you better even pressure across your die. So here again, this will help you with your wear and tear on your dies. Now I don't want to slam that down in there. I want to set it in there simple, real smooth. And even though I know that it's right, I always, just by habit, check and make sure everything's lined up. And as you can see, them are dead on each other. Your dual bearings will always run cooler than individual bearings. That's one thing you might want, especially for long runs. Keep that in mind. At this point of putting our die in, we're now ready to put our pressure gauges on. There's basically two different assemblies for this. First, I'll cover the standard that probably comes with your press and the most common you see out there. It's a simple pressure bridge. It mounts on the press as such, with your open ends being toward the gear side. It's designed simply to screw pressure down onto your truck assembly and push pressure evenly. This is strictly done by feel. Experienced operators to the rookie operators tend to have problems with these because you always overset one side. And I know a lot of you are saying, oh, I never do. I do it personally. You overset one side. Make sure when you're using these that you do a real good die cut test on your labels, especially if you're using a machine applied application. As you're running, you want to lock these down, because if you don't, your pressure will come off. It's important that you watch these and you stay on top of it. This is a very basic manual system. You won't have much trouble as long as you stay on top of it and you do all the preventive things you should do. The next system I'm going to show you is the one that we tend to favor a little bit more. It gives us a little bit more consistency. It allows us, a rookie pressman, to set pressure right. It allows you to set pressure from each time you run a job consistently so you can get even die wear. And this is the Hydro Jacks made by Rotometrics. Real simple system, same thing. You have a pressure bridge assembly right here, and probably the difference is your Hydro Jacks. The way these work are real simple. As you put this in, and I'll show you the locking mechanism here in just a moment, as you put it in and you get it down like this, you simply will turn this knob to build up pressure. When you turn the handle, you're pushing a plunger out the end. If you can see this, watch right here. As I turn that, you'll start seeing the plunger. See it coming out? And that'll set my pressure. Now, the good plus about this is that each side of my die, I can set my pressure exact. So I'm going to get even wear on my die, I'm going to get even wear on my die cut, and I'm going to get even wear on my die anvil. So the possibility of me wearing something out is a lot less extreme, especially for rookie pressmen. We highly recommend that you use a Hydro Jack system on all your presses. One of the things that you'll find out, though, is as I unscrew this, my plunger does not come back. I need to apply force, and it'll push straight down, and it'll be back flat. Real simple device to use. I'm fixing to set it up here and show you exactly how it works. Before I put them in, I want to go over our lockdowns. This is simply the bridge. Oh, this is simply the bridge right here. Just screw it in. It slides over and screw it down. Okay. Now I'm going to take it off and just show you how this assembly works. We have two lockdown mechanisms. This pin right here slides over and locks in. Before you start, make sure it's completely clear. This is in the unlocked position. When I push this over and lock it in, as you can see, then I can lock this down and it won't move, okay? Before I start, I want to make sure that's open and this is all the way clear. If it's not going to work. Now I'm simply going to put this pressure bridge on. I recommend highly that you do it without the jack assemblies in. Makes it a lot easier to handle. Make sure everything's clear, it's unlocked, you're opened up. Make sure this is tight. You should not have to tighten the back screws. They're set so that it fits snug under there. Now I'm ready to put my Hydro Jacks in. Simply going to do this one at a time. I'll start with the inside one. It should just slide down snug. When I get it snug, I want to push this over. And if it don't slide over, just adjust it a little bit and you'll get it to slide over, and now it'll lock in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to want to have all my gauges facing toward me. This is not designed to take and turn this and tighten down. Keep that in mind. So make sure that you're good and snug before you start. I'm good and snug there. My pressure gauge is facing toward me. Now I'm ready for my next one. Same thing. Let it just slide